Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Tara, and we are going to talk about the Twilight Zone Season 4, Episode 13. It's called The New Exhibit. So, full spoilers for the episode as always. And we have an episode about a wax museum that's going out of business. The owner's shutting it down, selling the land for a supermarket. And we follow the obsessive employee who is tasked with taking care of the wax figures, particularly the serial killer wax figures that he's very enamored with. And he brings them all home to try and keep them maintained in his basement, much to his wife's dismay. And eventually there will be murders, and I'll leave it there. We'll get into it. That's the premise of the episode. Now, I don't remember exactly what I said at the end of the last review when we previewed this, but I feel like I probably said I could guess what the ending was if I didn't say it out loud.
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. I must have had the thought though, because it ended exactly the way I thought it was going to the whole episode.
Did we know Martin Balsam was going to be in this?
I don't know, actually.
I was surprised to see him.
Actually, was this not... Wasn't the last episode the one that didn't have a thing at the end? So we read what it was going to be, but we didn't see any clips or anything like that. Whereas we do get one at the end of this episode.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense now.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see him.
Yeah, obviously he's known for Psycho and 12 Angry Men, so he was a big actor of the time period.
Mitchell.
Most people don't know him from Mitchell.
Well, he's kind of a celebrity around certain groups. I mean, he's kind of a celebrity.
He's a celebrity in general from the time period. I don't think you have to.
You don't hear people are like, yeah, Martin Balsam, like top 10 of all time, but he's definitely a name I know pretty well because of Mitchell.
Because of Mitchell, yes, which is a Mystery Science Theater 3000 movie for anyone
and
who...
you know, all those prestige films like 12 Angry Men or whatever.
Oh yeah, 12 Angry Men, one of Hitchcock's best films, Psycho. Yeah, all those, you know, pretentious good films.
None of them have Joe John Baker in it.
How dare he make good films? Yeah, so
there is something very comforting about, even though he always plays like terrible people, there is something comforting about like, oh, a black and white Martin Balsam face right now. I don't know. It's like, oh, all right, I'm going to get into this right at the start.
Oh, he's a good actor. Yeah, there's no denying that.
But I guess the comfort is just knowing that we're in good hands. Yeah.
But how did you feel about the new exhibit?
I really liked this episode a lot, actually. I think it was a pretty effective horror episode. Like, I know usually I did guess the ending. I sort of had like theories about what the ending might be but it's Twilight Zone, so they really could go anywhere with the twists, you know. But yeah, I watched the episode in 2 parts, so I wasn't really thinking too much about how it was going to end. But by like between after I finished part 1 where I took a little break and I had time to think about it, I was like, I bet it ends like this.
What's funny for me is that I had 2 endings in my head, and it did both of them. It did both of them back to back.
Yeah.
Which really made me laugh. And I was like, okay, you know, we're in season 4 of the Twilight Zone. Like, the first ending I thought of was something that just felt like a predictable thing that I've seen done in other movies. They came later, admittedly, but, you know, it made me think a lot of a certain movie called Maniac, which, you know, I won't go into too much.
Well, how did you feel about the episode, though?
Well, the second ending, though, was less so much that it was the obvious thing from the premise, but the second ending that I also predicted was like like this was less to do with like the premise and more to do with I know what a Twilight Zone twist is, if that makes sense. Like, it was such a Twilight Zone thing to do at the end.
Well, I think that's a fair thing to categorize, though, right? Because we know when something feels like a Twilight Zone like movie or TV show they're trying to like copy, or I don't know, so like if you describe a tone as like not quite sci-fi, not quite horror, more like Twilight Zone, it's you kind of understand what that means, you know. So they have a specific type of twist.
Yeah, and don't misread me here. I'm not saying that the endings being very sort of easy to see coming as being overly a problem, because I don't like this episode that much, but it's not really because of the endings. I think this is one of the worst offenders of this season of feeling stretched out to fill the 50-minute runtime versus the 25-minute, because this episode felt very repetitive to me, where it was kind of, there was a lot to the setup, which was actually quite simple, but they spent a lot of time doing it, and then it was very repeatedly, how the murders keep happening. It's very much the same thing over and over again, where someone's left alone with the wax figures, one comes to life, kills the person, rinse and repeat. Like, it's kind of that over and over again. So I have to say I wasn't super into this one, and I don't know if it's just because maybe it's because I've seen a similar premise done better, after this elsewhere. Maybe it's because it's just spinning its wheels too much and I feel it being elongated, but I didn't really like this one that much.
I don't know. I have to disagree. I think this one's done pretty well for what it is from the time. Like, I know you watch a ton of horror films, and I've seen a fair share myself, and you've probably seen these beats a lot, but this felt like a decent horror movie from the 60s to me, starring Martin Balsam, because it was an hour long. Nice and short, for a horror movie.
Yeah, for a movie, yeah. It was just...
I like the tone of it. I don't know. I thought the pacing was okay. And yeah, I guess it is kind of repetitive, but I also kind of found there was an interesting statement to be made about, like, people who obsess about serial killers, especially, like, post the Jeffrey Dahmer Netflix series, where people are, or like even these movies where they are, all the Ted Bundy movies and stuff that have come out previously, and sort of like our obsession with serial killers and like putting them on this certain pedestal where, this man is obsessed with just the serial killers. And of course it plays into the twist, but it also, it's kind of making a statement in a way about why are we obsessed with this? And is it a good thing to keep showing off or to glorify what they've done?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's there. It's like, I think just about anyone with half a brain, as soon as the wax figures start coming to life and killing people, it's first it's his wife, then it's his brother-in-law, and then it's his, like, employer, ultimately. Like, I think immediately I was like, it's not really them, it's him. Like, the whole point of this, whether it's literal or not, it's him that's really the killer. This is all just, like, either in his head or... I
mean, we definitely see the wax figures do it, so maybe the twist was more of a surprise to audiences who haven't seen this kind of thing before, but, like, I don't know. So that is, like, the red herring, though, right? Is that we see the wax figures move and go after them.
Yeah, I mean... Maybe this is just a thing where, like, I'm just so used to not always taking things literally when I'm watching a movie or a TV show that, to me, I never saw it as a red herring. But yeah, maybe in the 60s this was a red herring because, we actually saw it move, so therefore it must be really happening. Whereas, because the ending definitely shows us, they weren't really moving. Like, this was all just him in his head kind of thing. And it's explained as much even when we get the tour guide at the end. No, because now he's added to this killer's row. Now he is one of the wax museum figures as a serial killer. It made me think of some other things, actually, that one of which I think predates this. It made me think a little bit of how I call it, say it's A Bucket Full of Blood with Dick Miller, where he's an artist who starts killing people to make wax figures out of them, but he just covers the bodies in, like, wax or whatever. Or maybe it's not wax, maybe it's like porcelain or something. But it was giving me vibes of that a little bit, to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we talked about that last time where we were thinking this was like a House of Wax film situation, but it doesn't, not really, not in the way I was thinking when we were talking about what the episode could entail.
Yeah, I think one of my pacing issues was probably more the first half of the episode. I felt like it took a while to really kind of get going, and I don't know if it benefited from the extra time that much because, we get him talking to, like, a crowd, about the figures, and that's fine. Like, that sets up the killers, it sets up who these various figures are. You got Jack the Ripper working here.
And his obsession with them.
His obsession, yeah. Everyone else thinks he's a bit weird and just wants to leave, all that stuff. But once you actually get to him like being told that the place is shutting down, like there's quite an extended scene of him like not really accepting it and trying to talk his employer into reconsidering. And then alternatively, there's also like him talking to his wife, multiple scenes where she's like, this isn't a good idea, this air conditioning to stop them from melting is going to cost a lot of money. Do you have a new job yet? It doesn't seem like you do. So how are you paying for any of this? And so and so on. There's like a lot of that, and not that the general plot beats are like invalid or anything, they're all fine, but like it takes, there's a lot of like reiterating them throughout these scenes as the scenes go on. And I kind of felt like it was taking a while to really kind of get going. So when it finally got to the point where finally like one of the wax figures like goes to kill someone,
let the murder begin.
I was like, oh, here we go. Okay, right. Like I think because there's some episodes in this season where we have commended and said that the character drama is a lot more dynamic because we get the time to actually really get into the character and learn about them enough that everything means more. And I think there's several examples in this season that achieved that. I actually think this episode would be tighter if you trimmed it down to 25 minutes. And I think you would lose almost none of the beats. You would be able to keep almost everything.
I definitely don't feel the same way. I think I enjoyed the character of Martin so much because he was played by a pro, but also...
Oh, sure, yeah.
I liked his responses, I liked the little subtleties of him calling them friends, and like nobody really acknowledges it, but you hear it and you're like, oh, that's not a normal thing for an adult man to say about wax figures. Or I don't know, like his sort of obsession, but not, it's a different kind of madness than we've seen previously, and I think it's performed really well, that I don't really mind the slower parts. I think the build-up is still decent.
Do you know what I think actually maybe also part of the problem, now that I'm thinking about it, and why some of these scenes were a bit, I won't say grating, but just, felt like they were taking a while, is I think there's a lot of like elements that are recurring throughout Twilight Zone that I'm starting to like notice and be a little bit bored by. Like, there's been several episodes at this point where the episode will start with a character being told that their role is ending. Like, we had Donald Pleasance being told he's not going to be a teacher anymore. It's a very different episode with a very different tone. But there's a lot of episodes where it starts with someone saying, oh, the job that you care about or this passion that you care about. Hell, even that great episode with Robert Duvall that we had earlier this season was him obsessed with a dollhouse, just kind of like how this guy's obsessed with these wax figures. So I think there's like enough recurring things in this episode from episodes that aren't even that long ago for us having watched it through, that maybe not enough of this felt fresh to me, so I was just kind of feeling like, oh, we're kind of replaying some similar beats. It just happens to be fitting into more of a this guy's a serial killer ultimately mold by the end of it.
It felt good to have a horror episode again. Not that they do a great job with horror all the time in this, but like it was nice that the tone had shifted from the other episodes.
Oh, from the Genie episode that we just got?
Yeah, from the Genie. And even like the next one, because we do get a preview this time, sounds like a familiar beat even from the season. Not that hasn't worked previously, though, because we often say that, this is a story that's been done before by Twilight Zone 5, 6, 7 times. But, the best ones aren't always the early ones or the first ones that did them. No,
that's very true. So, yeah, well, I just said everything I did. Yeah, I will concede that sometimes, like, it'll improve upon some of its same ideas again. I don't think this is a case of that happening, though. And to go all the way back to season 1, there's that great horror episode with the mannequins coming to life.
That was a good one.
Right?
For sure.
And I think that's better than this. And obviously, it's easy to compare them because, it's wax figures coming to life. So, there's some parallels to be made. So,
I mean, even the ending's kind of a parallel. Probably a lot of that comes from...
That's a good point. The ending's almost the exact same with her becoming a mannequin.
Yeah. Less dead people, though, in that one. A lot of it probably comes from the fact that they get the same writing team, the same writers. Like, this is a Charles Beaumont episode, though I don't know if... Because I know that he started to get real sick by the end, so maybe this is like an early script that he had done or something. But
there is an uncredited other writer on this episode.
Oh yeah.
So maybe like he was needing help by this point.
Yeah. I know I want to say it was like halfway through the show that he started to get real sick or something. And we're in season 4, so I'm not sure. But yeah, you have the same writers, plus you have the pressure of putting out so many episodes in a season week to week, and each episode has to be new. Like there's not a continuation of previously on Twilight Zone. You know, you have to come up with fresh stories, like fresh cautionary tales to tell every single week.
Yeah. I guess fundamentally, I just kind of I appreciate them doing a story about someone who's actually becoming a serial killer and is mad, and they're trying to like tackle that. I actually do think that's a really interesting subject for Twilight Zone to tackle. But I think all of the other elements are all elements that have been done in some way better in previous episodes. So I wasn't really getting excited by that. Plus, I thought the pacing was a bit slow as well. So I think you combine those things. I was kind of left feeling a little bit, just like it wasn't like I'm not saying it was a hard to watch. I'm not saying it was a difficult episode to get through. It was pleasant enough. Like you say, you've got a good actor in the lead role. You've got the things building up. It's a fun enough premise. It just, I never really felt myself all that engaged with it, and I was kind of like, I don't think I'm going to be leaving this feeling, enthused with it. And sure enough, like I kind of left with it just kind of chuckling about how it did both of the endings I was expecting one of the two endings I predicted. I was expecting the mannequins come to life and get him, and I was expecting he's going to be like the new mannequin or the new I'm saying mannequins now because of that other episode. He's going to be the new wax doll, and sure enough, both of them happen back to back. So
yeah. I do wish that when the mannequins were walking after him, that they were actually speaking instead of him just hearing the voices, because I didn't think the voices were very good.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I also thought the brother was a bit much. Like his acting was a bit much.
The brother-in-law was a little bit over the top. Yeah, because part of the plot is that when the wife's worried about money, she goes to her brother for help. And
who's like a clown. I mean, he's not a clown, but like he talks like a clown. I don't know. His acting was too much.
Yeah, the main character's not very happy about it either. Feels like he's being emasculated because she's went to her brother for help to get like a loan of money or something, and because that's the thing, she keeps saying, we can't really afford this, and his solutions are, we'll remortgage the house. We'll do this. He says, we'll get more debt. We'll do all these things.
All that matters is keeping these wax figures.
Yeah, which obviously is obsession. It's a hint that it's like this obsessive personality, and of course, everyone who is killed is someone who is getting in the way of him maintaining those figures, because his wife wants to turn off the air conditioning. She has to die. The brother-in-law is discovering them. He has to die. And then the museum curator guy who comes back and says, hey, I found a buyer to buy all these figures. This is great news. This museum in Germany wants them or whatever. And he has to die because he's going to sell them, because now it's not just about maintaining them. He has to have them. He has to keep them.
Yeah. Do you think that it's trying to say something about like the obsession of serial killers it means that maybe you have something deep within you?
Given how much true crime my mother likes to watch, I certainly hope that it's not the case. But
yeah, it's definitely a lot of white wine moms.
Yeah, there's a lot of middle-aged to elderly women who love watching stuff about serial killers. So I'm not convinced that there is a correlation necessarily. I mean,
well, it's interesting that you would go to not convinced.
Do you think your mother's a serial killer in the making?
I mean, I think that she has potential.
I think there's different types of people who become obsessed with serial killers, and I think yes, there's going to be a unhealthy minority who are the ones who are dangerous who could become serial killers. I think there's a healthier majority who are just fascinated by the macabre, right? And as someone who likes horror,
oh yeah, totally.
As someone who likes horror, I can kind of understand it. I don't really like sometimes it's interesting to hear about stuff and how people were caught. I enjoyed watching Mindhunter when that was on. That was a good show that kind of like put like some of the real cases of the world into the show in a kind of a Hannibal Lecter style format, where they would go and interview the serial killers in prison, and that was kind of interesting. It was like sort of using real history to kind of explore the psychology of it and all that. And I guess understanding the psychology, part of the appeal is like, being able to spot it, possibly prevent things, possibly, there's noble pursuits in it. Admittedly, I'm not sure if wax figures kind of contributes to much of this. Oh, and just look at them, aren't they spooky because they're a serial killer?
He was a great storyteller about it, right? Like he had a lot of enthusiasm when he was talking about what they did and why they're so, why they were so great at what they did.
Oh, there's a hint at the start when he's talking about Birkenhair suffocating people. He's like, you can only imagine what any of them went through, and someone says, "Oh, you mean the victim?" And he's like, "No, all of them. Like, imagine taking a life. Like, it's almost like he's thinking about it. Like, what's the thrill like of actually taking someone's life when their breathing stops and their heart stops? What does that feel like? You love that. I think. I mean, it may have some of what you're saying in it. I have no idea what it was like in this time period though, because all this true crime stuff that everyone's obsessed with now, like there's like 2 or 3 channels that do nothing but like the documentaries all day, FBI files and stuff like that, where it's all just talking about serial killers. That obviously didn't exist in the 60s. I'm sure there probably was, like, the fact that we're talking about Jack the Ripper and Birkenhair, and I'm sure there's other examples from the time period, although it is worth mentioning, I think the majority of modern serial killers, to use that specific term, didn't really exist yet, or some of them did exist but they weren't caught yet.
No, I mean, like Jack the Ripper is probably the most famous one from prior anyway,
and he's got a bit of a spookiness about him because he was never we never identified who it was.
Well, we know it's because he went to the future.
Very good. But yeah, he was never identified, so there's kind of like, well, that's why they can do shit like that, is because we never identified him. Like, fiction can do whatever it wants with him. It can
he's like it's like DB Cooper or something, right? We don't know where he just disappeared, so.
Yeah, I stand by Rich Evans' guess though that DB Cooper's Tommy Wiseau, and that's why he had money to make The Room.
Oh. Interesting theory.
He's much older than he says he is. You can't deny it.
Yeah.
Or it's Loki if you go by the Loki TV show, but
that was cute.
Yeah.
But like, again, like that was so long ago, Jack the Ripper. So like, when is I don't mind watching Jack the Ripper stuff, but like, I don't know. I haven't watched the Dahmer series, and maybe I will one day. I don't know. I don't have that true crime bug that a lot of people do. I'd rather watch fake stuff than real stuff.
Give me like brutal fake stuff. Like, give me Terrifier 2. Give me that.
Exactly. Yeah, I like a lot of tomato soup blood. I don't like real blood. So.
No, I mean, it is interesting. Like, I don't know. I assume there was always a fascination about it, and that's why an episode like this even exists, is because there is like people who will read about Jack the Ripper and other classic killers, and it's something that's only gotten bigger because the idea of a serial killer, like so many big serial killers are from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and like you think of those time periods and you think of the big names, you think of your Ed Gein. I know he'll be older. He'll be 50s or even earlier, because obviously Psycho was partly inspired by him. So he probably is known by this point. But there's definitely a lot.
Maybe that was too early or too soon for this show, though. Like we don't want to put Ed Gein in the Wax Museum yet because it's still fresh.
Oh, maybe. Oh, they don't know about him though, because this is after Psycho. This is 63.
Yeah, but like but Ed Gein was before then, right? So like they didn't have an Ed Gein wax figure because they were probably thinking that wouldn't be appropriate to do right now because it's too close to when the crimes occurred.
I get what you're saying. They've made a conscious choice not to do it because it's too real, too recent, too whatever.
So like, but what is that cutoff? Like Jack the Ripper, like I don't have any problem watching Jack the Ripper stuff.
I think what I would say is so the Dahmer show got some flack from family members of some of the victims, and I think that's probably a good indication to me that probably the natural, because I also don't, I'll happily watch a Jack the Ripper day, I don't care. I think the natural cutoff is when all the immediate family of the victims have like naturally passed away. Like once you get to that point, you can probably have some fun with it because the people who will actually have like weird feelings about you making a story about this are gone. Like obviously there'll still be descendants of the victims, but there's someone's great grandson who's only heard vague stories of who this person was. Are they going to feel the hit quite as much as probably not?
And I don't want to say that like I have a real problem with this, because I don't know that I do. I just think that I just don't have that true crime bug, like I said. So I don't, I'm not into it, but I'm not saying that it's inappropriate, because I don't know. I don't know what that cutoff is really. Like, you seem to have a hard cutoff, but I don't know that you won't watch the Dahmer series, in the next 10 years or something.
Well, I'm not saying I do have a hard cutoff. I'm just theorizing what the cutoff maybe should be.
Maybe would be. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I have that hard cutoff. I mean, I don't necessarily like to look at the Dahmer show because I just didn't think it looked good. It wasn't because of any moral or ethical reason.
Yeah, it just wasn't a show that appealed to me. But like, Once Upon a Time Hollywood really appealed to me, and that's, a complete retelling of what happened to Sharon Tate versus that one with Hilary Duff in it, which seems completely inappropriate and tasteless.
We're obviously going off track because we're on the subject now, but like I think the thing about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and just in a broad sense, is that movie's clearly trying to say something about rewriting history, and it's got a kind of a sentiment behind it. It's like, I feel like Tarantino's... It's
a fairy tale. I mean, that's what's it's in the title, right? Once Upon a Time.
Tarantino's saying something. He's talking about something, particularly Hollywood, and about the like how rough the transition between classic Hollywood and new Hollywood was. Like, the independent, like, the 70s of Hollywood, because it's set in 1969. And it uses that as kind of a method of like changing things and showing how things could have been better. Whereas if you're just exploiting, like, because I said I like Mindhunter, and that brings up a lot of real serial killers. Now, admittedly, it doesn't show the murders that they were committing by and large. So you're not, which I think is the problem with the Dahmer show that the victims had, is that it's portraying a lot of the victims. Maybe they disagree with the portrayal. Maybe the gratuitous violence that's really happened to real people, and you're showing it.
Well, people were praising the performance of the guy who played Jeffrey Dahmer a lot too. So I think they didn't like. I'm sure they wouldn't like that, right? Like everyone's talking about Dahmer and searching him and like praising the performance, and like, well, stop thinking about him and talk about the victims,
Yeah, well, it's a fair thing. Like, anytime
I did hear that the show like took a turn halfway through and very much became about the victims and their perspective.
I mean, I think that's a fair thing just to criticize in general, is that you always hear about the killers' names whenever there's a tragedy with a killer involved, but you forget who the victims are, and that's maybe something that should be kind of addressed in time.
I definitely have seen a shift in the last few years in the like mainstream media to where they don't immediately talk about the killer; they always talk about the victims.
Yeah, I think
they don't show his face or her face.
This idea that we have
his face.
This idea that we have this, like Jack the Ripper, or we have like a Dahmer, we have a famous name and a famous killer. There is maybe something to be said, and maybe this is a line that is being crossed that is like almost like inspired potential killers. Is that most people, it's fine, but for people who are mentally unstable or maybe will commit crimes like that, a big part of it for a lot of them is the idea of the infamy, is the idea of like, they'll know what I've done and I'll be famous and I'll be like this legend, this the bad legend.
I'll be a wax figure.
Yeah. So the idea that we've glorified these killers from the past is maybe a bad thing, in the sense that it's like a motivation for some people who are disturbed to go on and commit something. So that's maybe again another argument for why you don't glorify the killers. You don't have their names become like household names. You know. They are facts in a case, but it's the victims that we remember, and so on and so on. And sadly, the more killing happens, the more people have maybe started to learn that lesson, and maybe that's why we're seeing a shift a little bit as time goes on. So yeah, I don't think you're ever putting the genie back in the bottle though with a Jack the Ripper, say. Like, he's always going to have this aura, Or H.H. Holmes is another one, because he built his murder house and like lured people there. Like, a video game just came out about that. The Dark Pictures anthology did their latest. I use game loosely. It's you occasionally press a button during a cutscene, and that's it. It's mostly just cutscenes.
Murder mystery games can be pretty fun though.
Yeah, but you're not solving anything in their games. You're just watching the cutscenes. There's an
Agatha Christie one that was alright. It came out on PS4.
Never played it. I know there's some Sherlock Holmes games where you like have to actually try and like find the clues and like put the pieces together and so on and so on. But
anyway.
Well, I mean, to give it credit, it gave us something to talk about, even if like it wasn't necessarily directly about the show itself.
No, but I definitely was thinking about it during the episode.
Yeah, and maybe that's what this character represents, and maybe Rod and Charles Beaumont are a little ahead of the time, and they're saying, "Hey, glorifying these killers is like making it appealing to this guy." Even though he doesn't. I mean, this guy comes across as more unstable and maybe doesn't realize what he's doing versus like a modern mass killer who like is clearly motivated and wants that fame and wants the notoriety of what they've done. So it's a little bit different, but yeah, like I think I think it's fair to say that's there.
Cool. And we get a trailer for the next one.
Yes, we do. We have what appears to be a she-devil.
Played by Catwoman.
Played by Catwoman. Yeah, the episode is called Of Late I Think of Cliffordville. And it's this really pompous-looking rich dude. Well, here's the description on IMDb, and we can talk about what we saw. Aging tycoon William Feathersmith. What a 1%er name. William Feathersmith is bored with life and makes arrangements through a devilish travel agency to return to Cliffordville for his youth and start all over again. So yeah, it's basically a time travel episode where he gets to go back into his younger body with his like experiences, and it's this devilish woman with horns that like sends him there. And we have seen, I mean, obviously the fact that a devil, like, so it's kind of like a genie, right? But more like a devil figure. But it's also the trope that we've seen a lot in Twilight Zone of someone going back to their childhood in some way, whether they're time traveling or, walking distance in the first season was like just walking into it and actually seeing their younger self there.
Yeah.
There's been multiple versions of this throughout the show. Or hell, it's not even impossible to even think a little bit of the Willoughby one with the train.
Next up, Willoughby.
Yeah.
And the title kind of talks about it too, so it makes me think of it.
Yeah, I think it's more like some other episodes that I talked about with those other elements, but the title definitely makes me think of the Willoughby one. Yeah. So.
We'll see if it's any good.
I don't know.
The little clip seemed like it was okay. At least it sounds from the description that there's going to be a bit of a comedic element to it also.
Yeah, which can go either way with Twilight Zone. So I generally have no expectations because I think I could have like a similar problem with this one where I might just, this is just like an assembly of like previous episodes without anything new to really add to it or say anything. But the fact that we're getting like what seems to be a more unsympathetic lead could be interesting.
Yes.
So, we'll see what they do with that.
And well, he's making a deal with a devil also. So.
Yes.
There's going to be some comeuppance for that.
When was the original Bedazzled out? I'm wondering if, like... Because that's what it made me think of. Are you familiar with Bedazzled?
I don't know that I've seen it, but I am familiar with it.
Because there was a remake in the early 2000s with... oh, God. Elizabeth Hurley, that's her name.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser, right?
Yeah. The original is 1967, though, so a few years after this. So I wonder if they were inspired by this episode. Or maybe it's just a classic trope that Twilight Zone... Because it's not like everything Twilight Zone does is like an original Twilight Zone creation. Some of it is like old, takes on old sort of myths and legends and stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's also... There's a Renaissance play, Dr. Faustus, which is kind of sounding like this, too.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of making a deal with a devil that is not new for Twilight, so that is definitely something they're taking. The idea of making it an attractive woman, I don't know, maybe that's new. I don't know.
Maybe.
But we'll see. We'll see that. We're on every other week schedule, so we'll see you in 2 weeks for that episode. But that is our thoughts on this Twilight Zone. So let us know what you thought in the comments below. Give us your thoughts on the obsession with true crime and serial killers, by all means. But that is the show, so thank you once again. You can support us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some early access, get other bonus content, but that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV in the Twilight Zone.